Welcome everybody. It's so good to have you here. We're so excited to have this opportunity to get together. This is Coffee and Tea with IWRC. That's the name of our webinar series here. My name is Stephanie Herman. I'm the membership coordinator for IWRC. For any new folks who might not know, IWRC stands for the International Wildlife Rehab Council. And we're a nonprofit that supports wildlife rehabilitators and related professionals through science-based education, networking, publications, and standards, things like that. Coffee and Tea are our free monthly seminars that we put on to support ongoing learning and connection within the community. With that, that is all the housekeeping out of the way. So I'm going to introduce our speaker this week, which is Kieran Lindsey, who is the editor for the Journal of Wildlife Rehabilitation, and she's here to talk to us about from paper to practice, making sense of rehab research. So I'm going to let her take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm seeing some familiar names, but I also, there's a lot of people here. So it's good to be here. And I was really excited to see all the different types of animals that are coming through rehab. It made me, have kind of a deja vu moment. In some cases, when I at one point was the the executive director of the Texas Wildlife Rehabilitation Coalition Center. And so it has now merged, I think, with one of the local Humane Society groups. But when I was doing it, this was back in the late 90s. Yeah, we were getting about between 5,500 and 6,000 intakes a year, I think. And one of the things that came in that was very unusual and that we never got again was we got a coati. They don't live in Houston, but somebody had clearly made a pet of it and then decided maybe that wasn't such a good idea. It should be free. And so it showed up in somebody's yard. And the thing I remember most about it is we found a sanctuary where we could take it. And while we were waiting, we had it in a large crate in the back. And I come back there to look, and what do I see? But it's got its like little sort of prehensile nose kind of sticking out of one of the little parts of the crate. And it's using that and also its paws, and it is turning the screws that hold the crate together and just slowly, little by little, trying to take the crate apart. So then we had to stop what we were doing and turn all those upside down and put them back because you couldn't get at them from below. And I was just, yeah, that was a memorable thing. And we got lots of other stuff too, because we were on a flyway and, we were near the coast. So we got pelagic birds and we got songbirds and we got all kinds of things. And so I saw somebody had written that it was raining jays on them. And I was like, oh, wow, that brings back so many memories. So let's see. In addition to being the editor of the journal,
Sorry, Kieran, do you want to share your screen real quick?
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
Oh, okay. Sorry
no, that's okay. I am also an urban wildlife biologist by training. And let's see. Let's see. I'm going to feel like it's this one instead. Yeah, there we go. So
looks good.
Good. Had some colleagues look at this and given me a hard time and were saying, Kieran, raccoons can't read. I was like, well, not yet. We will see. So the reason that Stephanie kind of reached out to me, we were talking about some things that had to do with the journal and such. And one of the issues that she said comes up a lot is that folks don't always know quite what to take out of papers from a peer-reviewed journal and how to interface with that information. And one thing led to another, and she asked if I would sort of take people through this. I have another alternative, kind of additional goal of this, and that is that when people have a better idea of what is in a journal article and why and how it's presented and all that, they might feel a little bit more comfortable about thinking about doing like a case study of something that they have seen and worked with and submit that to the journal for peer review. And that is part of the way that we are sharing information and expertise and experiences that folks have in their practice so that we can all benefit from that and not have to reinvent the wheel every single, invent a wheel every single time. So the idea here is just to sort of give you a general idea. I'm perfectly fine with being interrupted. Stephanie will be monitoring and she can break in if there's a question that comes up. So let's see. So the first thing we're going to talk about is why bother reading research papers? We have some standards that come out about how to care for at least some of the more common species that we work with. So what's the benefit of that? Well, for one thing, with the Journal of Wildlife Rehabilitation, it's part of membership benefits. So it's something that can be helpful to you. And there are other things in there besides the peer-reviewed papers. But basically, the idea is rehabbers need information and can share information as well about nutrition, about medications, housing and enrichment. Going back to medications just for a minute, one of the things that's kind of especially interesting and useful about any research that's done on medications with wild species is that almost everything that's used medication-wise in rehab is done off-label, because the pharmaceutical companies that are creating veterinary medicine aren't doing research on wild species unless it's something that is of particular interest to like zoos and aquaria and such like that. And so, there's been a lot of trial and error over the years, and we'll get into a little bit of how that's been informed, but getting any information we can get about medications and how they have been used and what kind of outcomes we get, that can be very helpful. Housing and enrichment, helpful. Handling and stress reduction, disease management, release decisions, all those kinds of things. But of course, we have to be honest about the fact that it can be kind of time consuming, and especially when people are really busy, that might make it harder to justify. Well, because pulling the information from these papers, if you don't have a clear idea of how you might most efficiently extract that information, that can be very time consuming. Findings can be kind of confusing. And the applicability is not always there for every paper. So this is part of what is informing this presentation, to kind of help you pull out what you need or decide fairly early on that actually this is not a paper that's very relevant to your particular practice, and therefore you can choose to spend your time on something else. So the learning objectives, what I would like you all to feel fairly comfortable with by the end of this is that you are feeling like you're reading journal articles more efficiently, that you're able to ask practical questions about the study quality, recognize common limitations and red flags and we'll get into some of those things. Quickly be able to decide whether findings are likely to be applicable in your rehabilitation setting, and just feel more confident about using evidence in practice. So the first question or tip is, it's really important to not ask a paper to answer a question that the research didn't ask. And so you're going to be thinking about, well, what question actually were they studying? Sometimes this will be posed as a sort of a formal hypothesis in the paper. Other times it's something that's just sort of written into the narrative, but there should be some pretty clear guidance to what they were looking for, what the population was, what the time frame was, all those other kinds of things. How narrow or broad is the question? If it's really broad, that might have applicability to a larger number of people, or it could be very narrow. It could be to a very specific species in a very specific situation. Asking yourself, is this question that's being asked for this study, is it relevant to my practice? Might not be. And is the species studied relevant to my practice? I want to dive into that part a little bit more in a bit. The second tip is looking at the abstract section. You want to use this with caution. It's a starting point, not, you can't get away from going a little bit deeper into the paper just by reading the abstract. The benefits of the abstract is it can help you very quickly decide whether or not this has relevance to you. It gives you a topic overview and it gives you broad findings, but it also tends to probably oversimplify the results a bit. It might be missing some of the caveats. And it also might be presenting some kind of an over-enthusiastic interpretation of the results. And part of that is because sometimes when folks are submitting papers to journals for review, in many cases, it's because they are academics and they need a certain number of publications to get tenure. And so they don't want the journal editors to dismiss the paper right out of the gate by presenting an abstract that is a little ambiguous or doesn't make a big splash when it shows up. So you have to be a little careful about that. Sometimes the reviewer should be catching that kind of thing, but sometimes it can slip through. Let's get back to such as the species relevance. And this is about paying attention to the study design. So first question, who was studied? If it's the same species as one that you work with, for example, you work with gray squirrels, and this is a paper that's specifically about gray squirrels, then that's the best case scenario. Is a close relative? Might be useful. Let's say you work with alpine chipmunks, and this paper is about lodgepole chipmunks. That's probably pretty close, given that, where they're living and their habitat and all these other kinds of things. So there's probably a pretty good connection between what you're working with and what this paper is about. Same family or order. Your skepticism is increasing a bit at this point. Yeah, raccoons and coatis, there's connection there, but you can't just assume that anything that was found out in a study about raccoons translates to a coati. There's a reason why they are different species. And so you need to take that into consideration. And it's especially important when you're looking at studies that have to do with where the focus is a domesticated species. You really need to exercise caution there. Yes, horses and zebras are both equines, but there are going to be some things that are fairly similar, and you can't just assume that because research has been done on horses that can naturally be used when you're working with zebras as well. So the takeaway from that is, how biologically relevant is this study? That will help you to get clearer about whether or not this is a study that's worth investing a little bit more time into. Again, paying attention to study design. One of the really important things is, how large or small was the study population? And we're talking about sample size. Are we talking about a case study where we might be looking at one individual, or we might be looking at 2 or 3 individuals? That can be helpful. It's not that it's not relevant at all, but it tends to be a very specific set of circumstances. Whereas in a more formal controlled experiment, you've got multiple individuals that are involved in this. And so you are trying to get a sense of, how does this impact, maybe not at the population level, depends on the size of the sample, but certainly more than just this particular case. And so in the JWR, one of the things I look for is to make sure that if somebody submits a paper that has just 1 or 4 individuals in it, that we're going to identify that as a case study in the title, so that it's a little clearer. Not all journals do that. So sometimes you have to be the one who actually digs in a little bit and sees, what was the population sample, and then make a decision about how that might affect how you interpret the results that they came across. How long was the study? Is it short-term or long-term? Seasonal or longitudinal? And by longitudinal, we usually mean over multiple years. Any post-release outcomes, as you all know, I'm sure that's one of the places where rehabilitation struggles a bit. We tend to count success is we were able to get it to the point of release, but we don't often know what happens after that.